professional experience. That would be basically what we're looking for in the newsletter.
Mm-hmm.
That's great, that's very helpful. Okay, what's next? Okay, next item, discuss the 2025-2026 fiscal year legal budget and letter from Board of Finance. So we got a letter from the Board of Finance a couple days ago. And they're concerned that we haven't budgeted appropriately for the remainder of this fiscal year. So basically through the end of June. So I welcome the inquiry because it's helpful. We spent last couple of days looking at this very closely, and I know Christine Calvert's here too. She and I were the ones who presented the estimate, which was the supplemental appropriation at the annual town meeting of $50,000. So I don't know if Christine wants to comment more, but at this point in time, we think we're on track to be within the budget. Depending on how you account for some of the charges, I think we have between 17 and about 23,000 left. And then we talked to the lawyers about any unbilled time. And primarily the big expenses are the plum tree. And so that one, we looked at what's coming down from Pullman Comley. And so after Keith became incapacitated, they had to get up to speed on that. And then they had to do that 830G text amendment. So we think we have enough to pay them. And then the Holleran and Sage, who's doing the Saddle Ridge, that has been, those meetings have been postponed. So they really haven't done, we don't have any bills that we haven't paid from them. So we think it'll be tight for sure, and that was the plan, not to ask for too much. But I think the Board of Finance also just was wondering about, how we did our projections and when we looked at certain bills. And there was one invoice for $16,000 that came in on a Saturday, I think it was March 7th, and then there were two that came in. One was from Keith Ainsworth and one was from on that same day. The Keith Ainsworth one clearly got accounted for, and then the Pullman one, I think there was my understanding was that we had planned for that, but it seemed like because we had discussions before, mainly oral discussions, but so what happened though was that that one came to Christine's attention clearly, I guess you'd say, on April 22nd, and then we had the we had the annual meeting on the 27th. So in addition to that, we got the latest bill from April on also the 22nd from Pullman Comley, which reflected that they had to get up to speed and take over Keith's case. So I think that so anyway, the long and short of it is that the Board of Finance was wondering, how did we do our projections? Are they accurate? What were the bills? Normally all the bills get forwarded the day that they come in. So we've looked at the procedure, and we've made some changes that we told all the law firms. They made recommendations. So the first recommendation was to make sure that we don't go over budget and to tell them not to do any unnecessary work. So they've all been told that, and to basically try to, freeze anything unnecessary. Some things are necessary, like you have to file an appearance in the litigation. But, you know, even things like attending a zoning hearing, if they're just going to observe somebody do a presentation, they certainly don't have to come in person, and they could watch the highlights later. So, you know, so just tracking this letter, we've adopted their recommendations, which were to basically minimize costs, make sure invoices are presented immediately. And they were, other than one, which, you know, that one, there was a miscommunication. So that's where we stand on that. I don't know if Christine wants to add any color, but I mean, certainly I certainly welcome the Board of Finance's input, because, you know, it was helpful, and but we did reach out to the law firms and make sure that, you know, we're not gonna go way over. I mean, what we don't want is what happened last year, where they went $50,000 over and had to do a special appropriation, and then unfortunately it was done in the wrong fiscal year. So that created so we're very sensitive that we don't want that to happen again. That's where we stand on that. And, you know, I certainly apologize if there's any miscommunications, but in general, I guess I would tell the townspeople that overall, we've been having much better luck with our new attorneys. They've been doing great, and we've been spending less money by avoiding litigations, number one. We saved a ton of money already avoiding a few. And then on top of that, we have been, because the letter was sort of questioning the rates, we do get a discount. Like, for example, Steve Staffstrom, his normal rate is over $600 an hour, but he discounted it to $455. So there was some questions about whether or not we're getting a discount. And at the end of the day, it's really how much do you pay to get the job and the case done in total. So you could, you know, lose a case, spend $50,000 and have a cheaper, lower rate, hourly rate. So, but that's actually a loss compared to winning a case, you know. So that, I think when you factor in how we're doing, which is exceptionally well, especially with some of these cases we were struggling with before that Steve took over, that like on the day one when I walked in, they were already in bad shape. The other thing I want the public to remember is that, like, when the day I came, when the recount was over, it was November 7th, I think. When I sat down in the chair, the legal budget was already spent for the fiscal year. There was a $100,000 budget, and there was over 70 already spent. So we started with 30,000. Then we went for then we went for a special appropriation. The Board of Finance in December recommended 150,000. And then there was some question about the voting. It looks like that should have passed if somebody's votes were counted. A
lot of these are not relevant to us.
Right, so I'm just giving the history. So then,
I mean,
so what happened was we used the 30, and then we used it very sparingly. Then we got to a special appropriation for 20,000, so we're at 50,000. So instead of spending, you know, having that 150, we had spent 50 during my time. So what I'm trying to say is we've been using the legal services very efficiently compared to the last time we tried to do this in the previous administration. And then we got to the point where we had to estimate how much we're going to use, and we estimated 50. Now in retrospect, I think, you know, we could have maybe, it's very hard to project, but we would have, you know, wanted to see that one invoice sooner. So, but that's where, you know, we stand on that. But overall, I'm very happy with the legal services and the results. I just think, you know, the Board of Finance is right that we should obviously always have very good accounting procedures. So we're going to have all the bills sent to a number of people here, so that none of them are ever missed, like coming in on a Saturday or an odd time or something like that. And I don't know if if Christine wants to add anything, no? Okay, but again, you know, I'm happy the Board of Finance is actively watching this, because we don't wanna waste any money. We've been asking for the minimum, so that's the plan at this point. And I'll open it up to discussion.
Do you wanna go first?
Go ahead.
Okay. A lot of information and a lot of providing context. I came here, I've had a lot of people ask me about this since it occurred at the Board of Finance meeting. A lot of Board of Finance members were surprised about this. I was surprised about it. I came here, you know, thinking, look, I've got a job, I've got to ask difficult questions. But I assumed that you would just sort of say, a mistake had happened, but now that was a lot of context that was provided. So I you know, two questions. How do we get here? Where do we go from here, right? Because we clearly got here somehow. And I think it's important for good governance and transparency. I think that this letter should be posted on the website and made available to the public. I'll make it available if you don't. My understanding is that these bills were emailed on a Saturday. Who cares that it was a Saturday? To the First Selectmen. And they sat, probably not, you know, it was an oversight, and that's okay. We all make mistakes, we're all human.
You're talking about one invoice. You said
For $16,000.
Right.
That then was never given to the finance director. So when the finance director and you met and decided that you were going to go to the Board of Finance and ask for $50,000, it was said, I watched that clip last night, it's an 8-minute long clip. It was said that $50,000 was considered maybe a high amount based on the information at hand. And I understand things happen, but that's only through the end of March, right? We still have April, May, and June. And I guess we had about, you said between $17,000 and $23,000 left. I mean, that's tight, much tighter I think than anyone wanted. I think that if you asked for the board, whatever number you asked the board, they were gonna give you. I just wish that we knew about this, and I think, you know, where do we go from here? We need to be more clear. You're putting a process in place. The Board of Finance has made it very clear that you got to be careful with legal fees. There were also some cases that matters that I think that weren't discussed by us or approved. Again, we should be included in some of the larger dollar number ones. Of course, you have the ability to pick up, and we're going to talk about the policy next. I don't want to drag into that, but I think we should be doing better as a town with this. I think Easton needs to do better. There needs to be better oversight and management with things like that, because that's a big one. I mean, we've had, and before you, and I understand that, issues with overruns and illegal costs, issues about going to the town in the wrong fiscal year. There's like a huge, and Art says this in his letter, there's a huge spotlight on this issue. And to say, like, I take issue with the context that it was provided in, and I think that I'm more concerned about, so something happened, let's make sure it doesn't happen again. And if you just sort of came and said a mistake was made, I think I wouldn't have said a lot of what I just said tonight, but I think we need to do better with this.
Well, I did say a mistake was made, so.
I hadn't intended to say much, but I think the severity of this letter, I do think posting it is beneficial. The tone of this letter is much more severe, I think, than you're portraying, because it is, and I just don't want to be downplayed, because it is, like I said, we've been dealing with legal issues and legal bills and trying to get this right for a couple years now. And we keep finding ourselves in these scenarios, and we have to stop going back to the town and saying, look, we need more, we messed up, we didn't estimate right, something, unexpected things happen, absolutely. And legal fees are hard to predict, but it makes it even more challenging when people don't have all the information, so.
Right, and I get just, again, I mean, my understanding based on my conversations was that we did have everything in front of us. So that was the miscommunication. So I think everyone agrees that nobody's withholding or hiding anything, you know, it's just
I
during,
certainly think
during,
that's not the case. I
during,
think- yeah, I
during,
agree with you on that. I agree
you have
with
to
you.
understand that before these meetings, and even that day, I have emails where we're asking the lawyers that day to give us updates on what is work in progress, the WIP, you know, what has been not billed. So I mean, we were having these conversations, trying to get the best estimates that we could. So I think there was a miscommunication there on that $116,000. I mean, basically, we're talking about a $16,000 miscommunication. That's what this is all about. So I do think, I mean, you can post a letter. I'm happy to go point by point. I think there's a lot of things in the letter that are completely inaccurate, and so, but you know, at the end of the day, overall the town is doing great legally. We're spending less money and getting much better results than we did in the past, and I think we should be very proud of that. And in fact, we're $80,000 less than if we had approved the 150 in December. So, you know, there's a lot of ways to look at it, but the honest truth is, we're saving money for the town compared to past practices. We're getting better results, and clearly, and I can go point by point on that. And, you know, there was a $16,000 invoice that I thought was accounted for in my discussions that wasn't, you know, and the unfortunate thing is, even though we knew before the annual meeting, you're not allowed to raise the amount that you asked for once it's been noticed. So that's another procedural hurdle. It would have been nice if, you know, because we knew, say, 5 or 6 days before that we were close, you know, we could have raised it, you know, another 13 or whatever. But the good news is that we think we're on course.
So with a burn rate of like 20-something thousand a month, you think that we're gonna only spend 20,000 the next 3 months?
Well, I mean, that's another part about the letter that really is inaccurate, because they're saying burn rate. It goes project by project, right? So, for example, Saddle Ridge, nothing's happened. So we have $1,100 that hasn't been billed, and that's in probably no more. So to use a term like burn rate, when it's actually two major litigations that have busy times and then nothing happens, you know, it's hard to. So I think that's a little, when you're talking about context, you know, I mean, you have to be factual. So when nothing's happening in a litigation, there isn't any billing. So, you know, that's obviously not in the letter. So, I mean, and as far as releasing the letter, that's fine. I don't care. I'm fully transparent. But I mean, typically these are things that are handled, you know, with the Board of Finance. And Art Laske did actually say that he wasn't, the chair of the Board of Finance said that it wasn't his intention to make this letter public. So the Board of Finance wasn't intending to make it public. It was.
Well, they had a public meeting where they discussed it, I sat here, no one else was here, but I sat here.
Well, that's according to the board.
There was a public meeting, and the
So
context of
if
this
you
was
wanna make it
discussed.
public, I mean, that's up to you, but I just want people to know that, you know, it's,
Can I ask a related legal question? There was discussion about recouping some of the fees from some of these zoning enforcement matters. Is there any progress on that? Is that something that is still potentially
well, you
an
have to
option?
win, yeah, you have to win the cases. So, I mean, we're in the process. You know, there's one, I don't wanna name names, but there's one that's going pretty well. And then there's, you know, it's, as everyone knows, it takes a long time to go through the court. So, yeah, I mean, that's a good point. Steve has been successful in Reading where he wins the cases and he gets attorney's fees. So, you know, that, of course, that would be, you know, ideal.
Mhm.
And it does happen, you know, because a town really shouldn't have to pay if somebody's an egregious violator and you have to, you know, they're doing things that are so out of bounds that, you know, they shouldn't be, nobody no reasonable person should be doing that. So why should you have to pay to enforce against an egregious violator, like, you know, and that's what most of these cases don't get litigated until they're that level of severity. You know, we're not suing the average resident who put his shed 10 feet too close to a wall. These are big, you know, people are completely, you know, altering their properties. So, but you're right, I mean, that's a good point. But anyway, I mean, if I wasn't clear, I did say, you know, there was a mistake. I take responsibility for miscommunicating. But honestly, there's, you know, we've been very detail orientated with everything, and with everything we do here, and we are going through a whole punch list of things that were undone before, and we're getting them done. So, you know, I just don't, you know, you can release the letter, you can spin it for political purposes.
That's not my intent, that is not my intent
Okay.
here. I did not, before you gave your description of this letter, which Christie has said too, is very different than your public description of it. I had no intent, this is not about making political hits or something back and forth with you and me. I was elected to be a selectman, we all were, and we're here to help you on the things, and this is something that we can help you with. And something was missed, and if you just came in and said something was missed and we're working to make sure it doesn't happen again, I would have just sat here.
But that's what I did say that.
In your opinion.
That's what. Okay. The next item is discuss the Board of Selectmen